Okay, hello everybody to our lecture in macroeconomics. And yeah, as I told the guys who entered yesterday, this lecture will be given in parallel as a Zoom meeting and also afterwards, if it's technically possible, I will upload also the lecture that you can have a look at it at my YouTube channel. All this I put now in the general things, I think, here. Put in, oh, let's take this one. So here in the general information which you find in the Moodle course, you can see my YouTube channel, and also the content of the lecture will be on my homepage uploaded. Okay, yesterday we started with an overview, and yeah, that I also recommend that you read other books, but anyhow, I'm giving my own lecture, and then it's also a good thing to have another view from somebody else who is talking about macroeconomics or economics in general. And then, yeah, what I think is really important that you definitely start in your studies to have a look at the internet and to really use the internet, not only clicking, but really use it in a scientific manner, so to speak. And this means for me, especially since you are studying economics, that you are going to the data to have a descriptive overview about something you want to need. And in economics, this is quite often about data. Well, this lecture deals with macroeconomics. So the institution I put here for you on this slide, they mainly deal with macro data, but if you take here the statistics office, also in every country, they have mostly a statistics office, and there also you find data for almost all topics you are interested in. And then, since these are academic studies, then it's also helpful to read about things you are interested in, what other people have already written about it. So reading scientific papers, reading scientific studies, and so on. And for this, I put here for you on this slide all or many of the economic institutions in Germany especially, and in the world in general. And there I also recommend, if you go further in your studies when you are writing your PhD thesis, then this is a good choice, a good start to have a look, well, what has anybody else written about the topic I've chosen for my PhD thesis. And maybe you know that sometimes your supervisors say to you, please, not only, well, you can quote newspapers or something like this, but it shouldn't be the general case. There should be also scientific literature. Of course, it's the PhD thesis, and it's not that hard. But if you want to go on for a master or so, then you really have to do it, and you have to be able to read these papers, these studies, to get out what other people have said. So please start with these things right now within your middle of your studies. Okay, and then we will start, so to speak, just with the lecture. What is it about? And since this is an introductory course, I start from the broad view, and we just ask, what is economics about? What is economics? And with a smile, two maybe possible definitions. Economics is what economists do. So we just invented our scientific part, and then we start talking about it. So with a smile, of course. Or from a German writer, quite famous, I found the following statement: national economics is, if people wonder why they do not have any money, there are many reasons, and most meaningful reasons are the scientific ones. Well, is it useful what we are doing? He will doubt it. I would say, well, it is. If you want to run a company or so, then it would be quite important that you know what is economics about, and this maybe, yeah, some other definitions more in a proper way. And these I took from especially Mr. Krugman, Nobel laureate in 2006, I think, and a very famous economist. He wrote also many introductory books. And so in every introductory book, more or less, you will find a definition what can be economics. And he defines it, or they defines it together with Wells. Economics is a study of economies at both the level of individuals and the society as a whole. Here you just see the distinguishing that they already distinguish between the micro view and the macro view. So the society as a whole is then here the case. Or by Kohlander, economics is the study of human beings, coordinate their wants and desires. So this is more or less then how comes demand into the economy given the decision-making mechanisms, social customs, political realities, and of the society. So then he makes also the broader view. We want to explain economic behavior as a whole, or very prominent. Since Menkyo, I told you, this is maybe the most used introductory book in macroeconomics or in economics in general. And he defines it: economics is the study of how society manage its scarce of resources. Well, and this is, maybe you've talked about this in your introductory courses, business administration, or especially in microeconomics, why we are using markets to describe our behavior. This is because of the general scarcity of goods, because our preferences is more and more and more, but there are some resource constraints. Or this is taken out from some essay where Mr. Beckhaus and Medina, they just collected many definitions. So you can click on this here and then you find even more. But what we see here, they all deal with the same thing, but they are all different. So we have to admit that there is no definition what is economics in general. Everybody understands it in a little other way. Okay, so, but I think we understand what it is about. And then when we are doing economics, how is the path of economic analysis? Well, and then therefore I put this slide with the institutions where you can get data, where you can get studies and so on. So the starting point is, as always, when you are interested in some topic, a description of the economic events of your situation, in which you are interested about. So this would be the diagnosis. And then if you have this description, if you have also looked in history, how were revenue developing and so on of your company within the circumstances, then you are building a model in general in order to explain in general the economic development. So you make some theoretical design. Well, this is a model. And then, of course, you cannot only say, well, this is mathematically beautiful or something like this. Then you have to evaluate your model with the real data. And I think this you have done also in other courses, that you also like controlling or something like this, that you always have to check, is my view still the right one? And of course, we know that the world actually in our times maybe very fast, so that the framework is changing, and then you have also to redesign your model. But if you have, so to speak, a good model, then you can say, I take this in order to forecast the future economic development. Well, this is the same as you are doing in a company. Of course, you having something in mind, where is my revenue tomorrow, in the next years, in the next 2 years, restricted by the actual circumstances. Well, and as a macroeconomist, then maybe the guys in Berlin, in Paris, in Brussels or so, then asking me or other people, and they ask, well, interest rates are rising, housing prices are rising. War in Ukraine means especially resources, main resources for energy, and so are now more scarce in Europe, since our relationship to Russia is now a totally other one than 3 years ago. What does it mean, and what should we do, and how will the economy respond when we are make more expansion in the housing market, what is right now discussed for Germany? Okay, and then we definitely have to distinguish between two things. The first one in our economic analysis is, more or less a neutral one. We just look at the situation, then we think about it, then we think about how depend some variables to each other, and there we do not make any statement of this is the right thing or this is a good thing. It is just a description, and it is just thinking about causality between the variables. Can we argue that maybe it is a good argumentation that we demand less if prices are higher? And then we can say, from this understanding, we say, well, it could be better if we are now initialize some new investment in the housing market. And then we are trying to change the world. Then a scientist is working then as an advisor, because then he tries to change somehow the world using his own conviction, using my own view. And this you always have to distinguish. When you are also looking at TV or going in the internet and looking something up, is there somebody arguing as a scientist, a neutral one, or makes he a statement, or she, and saying this is the right thing to do, this is a good thing to do? And then for this, we distinguish between so-called positive issues. These issues are descriptive, and there I only want to explain the functioning of the world or the economy in special, and then the issue is totally neutral. I make no recommendation. And a normative issue means then we are judging about the functioning. And this is my own conviction, this is my own view, and I want to influence the results. And this is, of course, not neutral. Then this is my point of view, this is my statement. In our situation, I think it is a good thing that every private person obtains a credit of 100,000 euros in order to build a private home. and this will boost demand, and then the housing market will go up. But this is my point of view that this is a good thing. Okay, and for this, we take some statements, and you should try to argue, is this a positive statement or is this normative? Minimum wage, we introduced minimum wages right now in almost every European country. Even the United States have a minimum wage, but it is really low. And a minimum wage causes unemployed, low-skilled workers. Positive or normative? What do you think? Is it neutral or is it, well, I think there's something good, bad or wrong. What do you think? Yeah, because, well, there's some neutral understanding behind it, since what does in a market mean a minimum wage? Well, especially low skilled workers will have per hour a very low wage. And the minimum wage in Germany is, I think, around 13 euros per hour. It was 12, and it will rise to the next January, because there was some discussion about it. But the leading party right now, they made during the polls the statement, we will rise the minimum wage up to 12. It was around 10, and then they said, when we get in power, the minimum wage will be risen up to 12 euros, but it increases right now again. And yeah, this means if you have some sector where usually the people employed got, let's say, 9 euros per hour, and then you have to, because this is the law, pay them 12 or 13 euros per hour, then of course some of these people will be laid off. Not everybody, because sometimes then the company thinks, well, I cannot fire him because I need him, so I have to decrease my costs in some other position. But some of these guys won't have any work anymore. Well, there's no statement that it is good or bad. That is just argued in a logical way that this will be the case. Then let's go to the second one. The higher income of some people due to the introduction of a minimum wage outweigh the higher unemployment of other people. So we have, so to speak, the positive impact. There are some people still in work, they get this higher wage, but some other people are now unemployed. Positive or normative? Yes, because? Yeah, because then I really wait, there are some people, they are now better off, and some others are worse off, and then I judge the society as a whole will have a profit from this. And this was really a big discussion in Germany 2 years ago, before the last poll. One point of view was, oh, no, let the minimum wage as where it is, and the other, especially the SPD, they claimed, well, this is too low when you are working for 10 hours for 10 euros per week. This is too less to have a, so to speak, normal life. But they, of course, know that then if they increase this minimum wage, there will be others which do not have any work anymore. somebody in. So then, next one, increasing oil prices increased the demand for electromobility. Positive, normative. Yep. Okay. And what the others say to this? So where is the judging? Where is the statement that there is something good or bad? Yes, and what and which argumentation, which I have to admit, which neutral argumentation is behind this statement? Because directly you have oil prices and an e-car is not driving with oil. And also the energy is not produced by some oil power plant or something like this. Well, then this would be going into a normative. Then I said, well, I have to, but what is the economic dependence between oil prices and the e-mobility? There, I think you can think on your micro course. So we have here now two goods. We have an e-car and we have a car with which is driving by gasoline. So these are two cars. And what kind of cars? What kind of goods are these two cars? When you were arguing about demand, I think you have done this. Yeah? Yes, they are substitutes. Nah? And then, of course, you started with your derivation of demand. At first, the first determinant of demand is the price of the good itself. And then you started to arguing, well, it depends also on my income, my personal income. And then I think the third one was, well, my demand is depending on my income, the price of the good itself, but it is also depending on prices of other goods. And how does it react when the price of other goods, because I'm spending also my income on these other goods, how is it reacting? And there you have to distinguish, are these two goods substitutes or complements? And here you have definitely substitutes. So if the price for me itself is rising of the other good, so the car with gasoline, because I have fixed costs, the price just in the showroom, and I have variable costs, driving every day from A to B, and these variable costs are now increasing because the oil price is increasing. So in general, I can assume that the general price of cars running by gasoline gets higher, and this means the demand for the substitute, the e-car, is also increasing because now I'm shifting my demand from the gasoline car to the electro car. And this you called, I think, cross price elasticity, hopefully. No? Didn't you talk about elasticities? I really do hope that you have talked about elasticities. Because actually, in the education, supply and demand, we gave you also in the exams the whole demand function. But of course, in the market, we cannot see the demand function. What we see in the market is only the market equilibrium. And then what we see is that over time the prices and the quantities are changing. So somehow around these market equilibrium there we can extract data. And this then just means we can extract data, well, if we have small price changes, so then we talk about the elasticities. If price is rising by 1%, what is the amount, the relative amount of the change of the quantity? And here we've asked if prices of the substitute is increasing a little bit, what does this mean for my demand? So argumentation via cross price elasticity, and this is the neutral theoretical model behind it, deduced just from our preferences. Positive. Oh, there's one too much. Coal-fired power stations have to incorporate the cost of CO2 emissions causing the climate change. Positive or normative? Well, I do not want to discuss with you, is there a climate change caused by human beings or not? I think this is nothing about face or something. This is just a fact which we see from the data during the last 150 years. And this will definitely have an impact on our lives. So it's not about this. This we can take, or for me, as a fact. So positive or normative? Normative, yes. Because why? Yeah. Yeah, because we are then talking about do we want to have this climate change or not? Well, there are some people which say, well, it doesn't bother me, so anyhow, I'm going on driving and firing coal and gas and so on. But we can normatively, as a society, decide that we do not want to have this, and this is then judging for the situation. How can we, decrease the energy production by fossils? Okay, then this is in Germany, and this was also claimed in general from the United States, from all the NATO members, because if we look after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, all European countries drastically decreased their military budgets. Before, when we had the East-West conflict, we had military budgets around 2 up to 3% of GDP. Now we have in France, in Germany, around 1.2, 3, 1.5, and especially the United States, which still have a ratio of military budget versus GDP of more than 3%. They especially claimed right now also in this situation, no matter who is in the Oval Office in the United States, that we should also increase our military budgets. So we more or less decided this also in Germany. Think of this 100 billion fund, which was initialized by the government almost 2 years ago. So increasing the military budget to 2% of GDP in Europe reduces, due to higher interest rate payments, the national budget, and therefore tightens the possibility for future generations. So for you, positive or normative? normative? Well, this is just the decision which we have made. We increase this. And now we are spending more money. We do not say that it is good that we are spending more money. It is just now the fact that we are spending more money on military issues. We could, but here it is the question is not about is this a good decision that we do it, but this is now only the argumentation what happens now. Yeah. So the implication of this is just neutral. Yeah. Because what is behind this? Then there is less money in the future because we have to pay now. In general, this increase of the military budget will be financed by increasing the debt, the government debt, given more credit. And this means the state has to pay in the future more interest. And these payments then cannot be spent, for example, for education. If this is good or bad, this is not said. If I would then include here increasing the budget to 2% and then tightening the possibilities for future generations spending the money for other things like education, like infrastructure also is a good thing, then it would be normative. Okay? Good. Then we come at the end to a small look what we already talked about. What is the difference between micro and macro? Of course, here we look at the behavior of single persons, and here we look at the whole economy. And this means, in general, we make a process of aggregation. We analyze unemployment in general, not only looking at one unemployed people. Here we look at the single enterprises or single households. Or in microeconomics, maybe you said then the demand for chocolate, the demand for bananas or something like this, or in general the demand of one household for food. And here the total demand of all households. So then we ask, what is the amount of private consumption as a whole? What means or what is the part of private consumption for the performance of the whole economy? Or especially in Germany, still the automobile sector is very important for us. So we can have a look at one single company and their supply for cars, or we could look at the total supply of all enterprises. So we look at aggregate production. But here, if you have heard the news this morning that VW had to shut down all his production because of network problems they had in the world, in their worldwide network. Production was shut down in Germany. And since it is the second largest automobile company in the world, we can also imagine that the shutdown of this company has also a macroeconomic impact on our whole economy. Yeah, so there is no absolute distinguishing between micro and macro. You are then coming smoothly from the micro side to the macro side. Or let's take one in the housing sector construction enterprise with this demand for cement, or what we are talking quite often is what is the level of investment of the enterprise sector as a whole. So this means we are analyzing aggregates, and while we are doing this, we hopefully get then a general insight in the functioning. Oh, this was thing of our economy. But you have to keep in mind that doing this means also that we lose information. And there we can all again think about your coming PhD, coming BA thesis, maybe some later on also a PhD thesis. And within your BA thesis, maybe you want to make some market research, and you are asking 100 people, what is their behavior, their demand for some special good? And then you have 100 answers. And what you are doing then is you're calculating the average, you're calculating the variance, you're calculating maybe also the skewness of your data. And what you are doing with this is just the aggregation. You want to describe your 100 data points with 1, 2, 3 numbers. So this we can really compare with the statistics, or that is anyhow. Building aggregates means in general that we are averaging. And we have really to keep in mind that this is not the whole information anymore. And if we're going back before the financial crisis, there we aggregated also many credits in the world, and we all thought, or many people thought, that this is a really good way when we are financing everything from the whole world, because then everything will be more stable, because we diversified our investment, we diversified our credit portfolios, and well, there is a good argumentation that this could happen. But we have lost information in between these credit packages, and especially the correlation between every single credit we had there. And it was a pity, because these correlations just meant that the whole system broke down 15 years ago, and we had the financial crisis. So we have to be careful, or we have to keep in mind that also macroeconomic variables can behave in another way than the micro variables. Yeah, and to come in and by this overview, what are then general macroeconomic questions? Well, in general, we want to analyze the dependence between macro variables. What is the impact of the labor market development if right now unemployment rises? What does this mean for the whole economy? What does it mean for economic growth, for example? Then also a very actual example is still the European Central Bank is rising interest rates. And this especially means that credits become more expensive. And about this is a whole discussion. Is it still good that they are rising the interest rates? Where the argumentation is rising interest rates, then the inflation will hopefully come down. And there we have a third variable. Also, especially in Europe, the society becomes older and older and older, and not only because we are living longer, on average, the age is also rising because there are during time more older people than younger people come from the bottom. And this, of course, then means for your personal decisions about capital accumulation that I need when I'm retired also still money. But this phase I'm retired will be longer and longer and longer, and there are less and less younger people who can finance me. And this, of course, will then individually change your personal capital accumulation. And this, if many people are doing this because they are aware of this demographic change, then will also change the capital accumulation as a whole in our society. Or what we definitely have seen is that we hadn't only Corona and afterwards everything was the same, but throughout Corona and especially because, the economic politics in China changed quite quite drastically. So we had a change in the international trade flows. And also analyzing this is a macroeconomic question. Again, about climate change, we have already talked about. This will be for the next decades one of the main issues we have to deal also from the economic side. How, if we want to do all the windmills, all the solar panels and so on, and not anymore firing coal, driving by gasoline cars, all normative decisions. But if we do this, how can we finance this? And what impact will this have on economic growth? Or at the end, the very sad example, of course, Russia, from the area, the largest country in the world, not very surprisingly, is one of the largest suppliers, not only oil and gas, but many, many other raw materials. They are one of the largest suppliers in the world. What does this mean if we do not trade anymore or do not trade anymore in that amount as before Ukraine war with Russia? This, of course, has also directly, of course, an impact on the trade flows in the world. And as a first starting point during this lecture, I will show you also many data series in history. So some data which we have. For example, the economy in Germany has grown still directly after Corona with 2.6% in 2022. I think it was only 1.8% anymore. And in 2023, my forecast or the forecast of the Handelsblatt Research Institute, which I showed you, maybe minus 0.3%. And what does these numbers mean? Also, just 1 year ago, we had these very high inflation rates of almost 8%. Right now, it is, I think, 6.1. It was in August 23. Or government debt, we talked about this, but I have to admit that within this number, the official data number of government debt, you won't find the rise of military expenditure in Germany. Also, the special fund on climate change, because there we, just more or less outlaid the data in some other positions. These numbers we will see in some years then coming up. to us. But what does this mean that we have almost 65% relative to GDP as government debt? There are other countries which have much more. Japan is more than 200% debt relative to GDPs. Then demographic change. You should have this in mind at the young generation because somehow you have to finance the old one. Once this is rising in Germany, this is a law that it is rising up to 2030 to 76 years. But my forecast is that I'm 50 years right now, and I think I have to work until 70. I really think that there will be some political decision to again rise the retiring age. Or right now, as I said, the main refinancing rate operations has been risen. Oh, this is 2.22, and actual main refinancing operations rate is 4.5% in September 2023. And we don't know if this is the end of the rate of the main refinancing operations. So this is maybe this you more convenient to. These are the key interest rate of the ECB. Or in Germany, we have shut down our last power plant, or also related to the Ukraine war. We have here in Wilhelmshaven, maybe you have already seen this, the first LNG terminal at the end of 22. Of course, this had also a macroeconomic impact. So this as the introductory part, and right now we want to come to our first, not model, but to our first concept to describe the economy as a whole. And this is the so-called historical circular flow. This is a concept which was developed 250 years ago, not surprisingly during a time where society has changed. So we come from the society with kings and queens, and then the citizens, they became more important, and more important. The cities became more important and more important. And there was a physician. He should be also, I found it, the physician of the French king, Ludwig the 15th, I think. And well, science during this time also developed. So the medicine especially. And then they found there how the blood was circulating in a body. Well, and then you quite often look at your topic and then you say, what are doing other people? And maybe I can use their concepts. And those, they said more or less, well, we are looking, when we are look to economics and onto the behavior of the individuals, they are buying and selling things. And this is somehow in the same way as the blood is circulating in a human being. Something is going out here and coming in on the other side. You are selling something and I'm buying this. And this is very famous. You can also look this up in the internet. There you find also some pictures, the so-called tableau économique. And you see this is just in the time before the French Revolution, where society changed a lot. Well, how how was the situation of the economy if we go to France during this time? Well, then we look at what we had talked just a minute before. Who is producing the goods? What are we mainly producing? Well, and the main production sector during this time was just the agricultural sector. We will see then also numbers. What is the economic impact of the agricultural sector today? Well, there it was more than 90% of the economic performance. And therefore, he called this the class productive. Well, but they didn't own their production factor. Well, the labor, yes, but there's other main production factor, and in the agricultural sector, this is just land. And who owns the land during these times? These were king and queens, the nobleman, and the church, so the clergyman. And since they are owning the capital, he called them the classe propriétaire. And then is rising there the civilians, the citizens of the cities, and they start to sell and to buy things. And this is something in between. So we have the main production sector, agricultural sector. We have the ones who own the capital, and then more or less in between, there is this starting point of the trade, the merchants, and the manufacturing sector. And therefore he called them in between class sterile. And now we want to describe our society with a specific example. How are depending these sectors to each other? And for this, we in general have three possibilities how to describe them, how to visualize the dependencies between these sectors. And the first one, I think you are quite familiar to it from other lectures, is the account form. So we put an account for every sector. On the right side is what I'm on, on the left side, what is getting out. Of course, this in and out process, we can also visualize via a matrix form. And this is maybe more pregnant than this one. Because of course you can think of much more than only three sectors. And writing down 17 accounts on one page, then you see almost nothing anymore. But in this very compact form of a matrix, this is for some issues also a good choice. And this is then in general in macroeconomics done in the so-called input output table. Or in the end, we can put any sector in a diagram, in a graphical form, and at each arrow, we just write on these arrows what is happening. Well, this is still quite abstract, but now we want to start with an example. So within the agricultural sector, there we have produced, right now it's October, they all come in and they have commodities produced with 5 money units. So at first we think of this sector has of course also to eat something by itself. So for own consumption we have 2. Then we say they go to the city and they have to buy some things. So we are assuming that the agricultural sector is buying commodities for 1 unit. Then they do not own the land, so they have to pay the rent for the land. This should be 2, oops, ME, not GE. Or let's change this here. And this we should illustrate with a circular flow in the account form, this circular flow in the account form, matrix form, and the graphics form. So let's start. So first, own consumption just means I have 5 of my money units and 2 of these money units I'm spending. So I have 2 and I'm spending 2. So this would be the first part. The second one, P is buying for 1 unit from the manufacturing sector, class sterile. So I'm taking one of my 5. Here we know that we have 5 money units, and this is then going to the manufacturing sector. Also, we have to pay a rent of 2 to the nobleman, to the king. So 2 to the clergyman. But these guys, the clergyman, the bishop, has also to eat something. And so he buys also from the agricultural sector for 1 unit. So from his budget, he takes 1, and this is going to the class productive. And the last one, agricultural products are bought in an amount of 2 units by, oops, this has to be S, sorry, by class sterile. So we are coming from here to the agricultural sector. And if you look now at the account form, what bothers you? In the account form, what should be always the case? Hopefully you have done this. Yes, there has to be something balanced. Yes, every account has to be balanced. So the right side has to equal the left one. Well, if we look at the agricultural sector, we see here 5 and 5. So this is okay. But if we have a look at the capital owners, there this does not equal, and also in the manufacturing sector, it also does not equal. Well, now we can think of that many other things can happen so that everything balances, but I think we can also think of some really simple happening between only 2 sectors. What could happen? Give just an example so that everything is balanced. Any idea? From which position or from which sector of which signs of the account we have to initialize a flow to another sector so that every account is balanced. In here. Hmm? Well, we should have here that on both sides we have the same numbers. Now is 2 is larger than 1. So something has to go out from here. And where this has to go, that is everything is balanced. Well, if we are going out here from the right side, now we have to go at another sector to the left side. So I think we just go to S, or? So this was 5, and so we can say maybe the capital owners buy for 1 ME manufacturing goods from sector S. So this capital owners is sector E. Well, and then we are really balanced. So, and this is then a closed circular flow if every account is balanced. So, since next week, we have the 3rd of October, reunification in Germany. There will be no lecture. And on Thursday, we have a strategic workshop for our section. So there will be also no lectures. Therefore, I give you the matrix form and the graphical form as a homework, or just have a look at it. And I will just go on with the modern circular flow. Though this was just also because we have there only 3 sectors introduction to the circular flow, the description of the economy, and what we are looking at when we take the modern view. So let's go here. Then you see it in a better way. So there, if we take the modern circular flow, there we look at 4 sectors, mainly the household sector, then the government as a whole, enterprises, and we are not alone in the world, so there are other countries, and this we call overseas. And of course, we are in a modern economy. We are not changing directly goods, and there is actually main economic actions in saving and getting a credit, and this is more or less our financial sector, which is right now really important and really large. And so there we have also many dependencies. And for these four starting sectors, then they all interact with the financial sector. And so we also add the sector of financial institutions. And this financial institution sector, there especially we have the savings and investment process in a modern economy to describe. And also we have assets and liabilities going to overseas and coming from overseas, and this is then also there we make only a direct and aggregate description. Of course, we can also say that the household sector directly interacts with overseas, but from this we want to abstract then, because otherwise I would have many arrows to draw. So we want here to make only an aggregate view. And then we can say that we are looking at a closed circular flow when at every single sector all income flows equals the outcome flow. This was the balancing the accounts. And so we have to look what is going out and what is going in. And all this has to be at every single sector the same. And we hopefully consider every relevant flows. Okay, then we try to model 15 minutes. I hope this is enough. So then we just start more or less with a easy economy. So we have demanders and we have suppliers. So we will start with the household sector and the enterprise sector. What can you think of between some economic relationship between the household sector and the enterprise sector? What are doing in a macroeconomic view households when we are going maybe to the supermarket? And many people are going every day to the supermarket. What we are doing then? Yes. Yeah. And how do we call this? What we are doing then? This is, of course, general demand. Well, I put it also when I looked at micro and macroeconomics. Well, in general, we then consume. Huh? Okay. So this we call then consumption. But you are also right if you say it's demand, but then the thing, how do we call it, is consumption. And what is important, hopefully I have written it down here. No, we are looking describing the money flows. And this is important because the banana is going from the enterprise to the household sector. But we are looking here in the economy, where is the money going? Okay. So therefore, the arrow goes from household sector to the enterprise sector, and this is then CH, consumption of the households. So how goes money from the enterprise sector to the households? Yep. Yes. We are working there, and then the wages are paid. And this we call then H or YHE. So salary paid from E to H. Salary. The salary. Yes, because the enterprise are paying the money to the households. YHE. Yeah. So and now the government steps in. Great. Taxes. And there we can say both pay taxes. The households have to pay taxes, and hopefully the enterprises also pay taxes. So taxes and taxes. Household taxes and TE enterprise taxes. So what else of money flows we could think between government and households? Yep. Yep. Great. Of course, and if you take, for example, all paying the rents, all paying unemployment insurance, all this is a really, really large amount of money which is flowing back from the government. We always say, well, we have to pay that much taxes, but if you see, there's coming very much money back from the state. So this we call ZH, transfers or benefits, you called it, but I call it transfers from government to the households. Well, actually, if we take our change in the energy sector, for example, we can also think of transfers from the government to the enterprises. So we will also have this here, then ZE, transfers from government to enterprises. What else between G and H? So government and households. Yep. Definitely. Or look at me. I'm at a public university, so I'm also paid. So all public employed people. So there will be wage paying in a very large amount from the government to the households. and this we call then YHG. Salary from G to H. And we can think of another money flow from the government to the enterprises. Well, they are paying me, but what do they also need? If you look around here, all this stuff, this building, the table, the chair, the computer, the beamer. So to speak, the government is also consuming. He's just buying goods from the enterprises. So this would be then government consumption. So this should it be for the case we are looking in general, and then we come to the financial institution sector. Well, there we just said mainly it is the savings and the investment process. And for this, we can think that every sector is saving and every sector is investing. If you look at some books, then they said, well, households are mainly only saving, but I say, well, there is also actually, if we look right now in the private housing sector, we are also privately investing. And I would say that in general, every sector is investing and saving in parallel. So saving is, of course, we putting our money to our bank accounts, is so going from the household sector to the financial institution sector, SH, savings and investment. If we apply for a credit, building a house, then we are investing. IH, and also sometimes enterprises are saving. Also, you find then in some books where they say, well, enterprises are mainly only investing, and then they skip the savings dependence. And on the other hand, IE as the investing. Well, right now, we have mainly, because every year we are increasing our government debt, we have the investment of the government, but we look at the time, especially in Germany, the years before Corona. There we had, especially in Germany, a time of, I think, 6 years where we, in absolute amount of money, saved money as the government. So we had no deficit, but we had a surplus. And therefore, this sometimes you also do not find, because this was a very special situation. If we go then the other 50 years back in time, there was almost never a situation that Germany really saved something, but we had really in 10 years ago a very long phase where we saved money, and therefore I also introduced the savings part of the government. So then let me write down only S and I, savings of every sector and investment of every sector. Well, and then we go abroad, overseas. Well, this then we could introduce everything else. If I make an investment abroad, then maybe I have also pay taxes abroad and so on. But we will keep, as I told you, this as simple as possible. And so we say, well, we get some money as the household sector from abroad, and we also put the money abroad. And then we calculate all this together, and then we will see that we will have a net transfer or a net deficit. Well, somehow I take the position of Germany, and Germany as an old country, so to speak, is an economy which mainly puts more money abroad than we get from abroad. So maybe this is also because of our demographic change, because in an, so to speak, old economy, the rent you can get with an investment just in our country is quite often less than the rent you can get abroad from, especially in the developing countries, because they have higher growth rates. And therefore, we put in general more money abroad, and therefore I do not call it net deficit, I call it net transfer. Net transfer from households to overseas. But of course, you have to keep in mind this net transfers could be negative. If you go to another country and calculates there all numbers, this could be a negative number. So, 2 minutes left, but we are almost done. Dependence between the enterprise sector and overseas, we also want to make very simple. We just say we are selling goods and we are buying goods from abroad. So then, of course, we have two arrows. One is going in and one is going out. At which arrow I have to write exports, and at which arrow I have to write imports. So again, or just say me on this one here, you would write this is import, because we are buying something from, and then as in every lecture, every semester, I go here and say we are looking at money flows. And if we look at money flows, then imports mean which kind of flow? Losing money. So we have to write here the imports, because we are paying for the gas, for the raw materials, for everything. Okay? And when Germany is selling its cars overseas, then we get the money. So it's just the way around, but it is always the same when you give this lecture, and it doesn't matter. It's okay. Okay. And yeah, now we are more or less done, but there's only one thing left, that the difference between imports and exports, of course, do not have to match these transfers, net transfers. It could be, but it does not have to be. Well, if they do not match, what changes in our economy? Or let's write down here, exports and imports, well, the financial position of our country changes. And for this, then we define also an arrow which is then more or less, or not more or less, which is closing our circular flow. That in the end, everything at every sector, we can match inflows and outflows. And then we have by definition, right on this, that this just equals the difference between exports and imports. And then we have also to keep in mind our net transfers. Well, here we wrote the arrow direction going in overseas. This is also going in overseas. So we have to also subtract the net transfers. That this parameter then matches this, and this we call capital account of our country. So flow in order to close the circular flow. Okay, only 2 minutes. Too long. Yeah, that it was. And yeah, then nice holidays next week because of the 3rd of October, and all the professors are abroad, so to speak, on Thursday. And therefore there will no lecture on Thursday. Well, we could also think about much more flows here, but you know, if I'm writing now even more flows, then we will see almost nothing anymore. But these are more or less the main things we look at. And on the next slide, I have also typed all this that you need not only to read my handwriting. Okay, thank you very much, and then see over next week.